Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome to another edition of Thinking Like a Lawyer. I'm Joe Patrice from Above the Law. I'm joined by Catherine Rubino and Chris Williams, and we're here to talk a little bit about our last week of big stories in the legal universe, as per our, the point of this weekly show,
As per usual.
I was going to do that, and then I was like, am I the kind of guy who goes usual?
Yes.
What kind of guy is that?
I don't know.
I
just farmed it
so.
out to you, so now I don't have to.
Now I'm that guy?
Now I don't. Yeah. No, you're, yeah.
Okay. We're going to just leave that there.
All right.
And let's start with your favorite part of the podcast and mine.
Yeah. Oh, and yours?
Small talk.
Let's have a little bit
There
of a
goes the
small talk
soundboard.
here.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know if you listened to the podcast and you're absent, Joe, but
Obviously.
I just did the sound myself.
Oh. Yeah.
Welcome back, Joe.
Back, and here we go.
Welcome back to the show. It's good to have you. It reminded me, your absence, how much I enjoy making fun of you on the podcast.
Oh, is it then?
It did.
Yeah. So it seems as though nothing really happened while I was gone. The legal world was entirely really slow, especially crim law. Like nothing
happened really. I
Department
can't
of
think
Justice, quiet.
Cannot think of any series of major cases that have happened at all. At all. It's really weird.
So as somebody who's off coming back, it's been it's been great to catch up.
Did anybody do anything fun over the last couple of days? Since this is small talk, not legal talk. So we got to have something like personal so people know who we are as humans.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, my weekend was interesting.
What'd you do?
Well, this will be like a duh moment for Catherine. It might be a shocking moment for Joe, but apparently Taylor Swift is out here. The Taylor Swift has fans, unexpected ones too. So I got in a lift to head back home, and just some black dude that had like a silver bracelet on, looks like he could fight well. And I noticed that there was a Taylor Swift song playing on the radio. And I was like, okay, you playing Taylor? And he was like, oh yeah, everybody knows about Tay-Tay.
I mean, one of the best parts of TikTok is people that you would not necessarily expect to be Taylor Swift listening to Taylor Swift for the first time, and then they become Swifties in their own right because she's legit. Let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah, it was funny. He was I wanted to I always think it's fun if somebody embraces their goofiness, whatever. And I'm just outsider looking in. Taylor Swift is goofy, like getting changed in broom closets so people don't see her outfits. That's some Harry Potter mess.
I mean, I think she straight up admits that she's goofy. Like she says, I will never be cool. Like I am fundamentally uncool. That's who I am. Just really enthusiastic about what I do, and people like it. I think that's part of her lore. Yeah,
but so what happens? He does music. And he was listening to some Taylor Swift songs, and he was like, "Oh, her layering is fantastic. The sound work is great." Now, the only part of music that I do is listening to stuff that comes out of iTunes. But I'm assuming good layering is nice because I'm assuming that's preferable to bad layering. So, shouts out to Taylor. And I just couldn't get over Tay-Tay being a nickname. And I was like, Tay-Tay.
Oh, yeah.
He was like, yeah. One of my white customers got in. She was like, yeah, can you play Tay-Tay? So it was a fun time.
I'm enjoying you becoming slow. We're going to make you a Taylor Swift fan before this is all said and done, Chris. Just wait for it. Joe, I think you count as a Taylor Swift song. You've written stories.
I did write one story that was very Taylor Swift heavy.
And you made lots of references that you just you made off the top of your own head. So there you go. I think
I'm part of the culture. I can't
here.
avoid these things.
Some of it is very much inevitable, I think.
I think once you write a tailored Taylor Swift article for Above the Law, you can't play the not a Swiftie card. You're in the group now. Sorry.
Well, it was that it was a issue of jury duty, and some prospective juror basically said, I have tickets to the concert, so
First of all, that is not even a concert, it's a cultural event, so correct.
Fair enough. Anyway, and so I wrote the article about this issue and explained to the non-savvy how jury duty works and how this person probably could get a deferral and how that will work out fine for them. Just, you got to be upfront about it, yada, yada. But I littered it with Taylor Swift references kind of on the sly. So I thought that was...
It was not sly. It was incredibly obvious. I mean, in
Joe,
a cute way.
Joe only loves Taylor Swift if it's torture. Don't say I didn't warn you.
Yeah.
See, you're coming around, Chris. You're gonna get there. You're gonna get there. We're gonna make it happen. Yeah. We're gonna make it happen.
Okay. I am going to shake off small talk.
Oh! I love that I'm the only one who hasn't made a Taylor lyric reference in that segment.
So you're the problem?
Hi, it's me.
Yeah. Oh, no. All right. So what are we talking about today?
We have lots of things to talk about. You kind of alluded to the fact that Donald Trump has been indicted.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I mean, didn't that happen already?
It did. This is third time's a charm.
Oh, okay. I'm
getting
confused. You see, most people don't get indicted multiple times in front of multiple different jurisdictions.
In a summer, that is kind of unique. Regardless, even if you weren't the former president of the United States, that would probably be pretty unique anyway. But you might have heard he was indicted on 4 counts related to the January 6th attempted coup. And there was a judge assigned in the case, Tanya Chutkan, which, great news, very well-respected judge, D.C. Circuit, yada, yada, yada.
District, yeah.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes, it's district court. It's always weird, I think, when there's a district for the District of Columbia, when you have to write that out. Like when I was writing a story about her, she's like a district court judge for the District of Columbia. I don't know. It seems weird to put the same word twice for 2 slightly different meanings.
The DDC?
The DDC. Yeah. Writing that seems less weird than writing out.
Right.
To me. Anyway, so Tanya Chutkan was assigned, and because it is not...
I mean, this is obviously a very qualified judge, so I assume there was no complaints from either side about this, and everyone accepted this very calmly.
It's almost like you know where I'm going with the story.
Okay.
Lindsey Graham came out complaining about her bias, said that the judge in this case hates Trump. You can convict Trump of kidnapping Lindbergh's baby in D.C. and obviously pushing for a venue change, which, LOL, that is hilarious because let's not forget that Trump judge Eileen Cannon is also in the mix doing the other one of the other indictments.
And it's worth noting why both cases are where they are, right? There's a reason why Eileen Cannon has one of the cases and why Tanya Chutkan has the other, which is the Department of Justice is bringing these cases where criminal conduct happened. The classified documents that Trump allegedly made his lawyers lie to the Department of Justice about having returned happened in Florida. So that's there. Let's try to coordinate an effort to have fake electors and stop the counting of the Electoral College happened in D.C., so the case is there. If you don't like the idea of being in front of a D.C. jury pool, my suggestion would be don't commit crimes in D.C.
Sure.
I'm sorry, Joe. I have to interrupt you here. The real reason is because the anarchist socialist democrats are corrupt.
Well, that's the thing. I don't quite understand because the coup was run by Antifa, right? Like I didn't. No. It was okay. Yeah, I don't know.
We ignore that one.
That was So don't commit crimes in a place.
And both Lindsey Graham and actually Ted Cruz also joined in saying that Judge Chutkan is relentlessly hostile to the former president, which, to be expected, I suppose, that when the case appears to be a very solid case, you should attack the process if that's your bag. But the really fun little twist is that both Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz voted to confirm Chutkan.
Right. Well, because this is not actually a judge who was particularly controversial.
Right.
This was a very straight up nomination in the first place, and it is a very straight up judge today, having sat on the court now for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, the complaints about the judge make very little sense to me, and Trump too has we're going to come after you stuff. all of this makes no sense.
I mean, it's coded, right?
Right. Well, sure, but it really underlines how problematic this person is as a client, making enemies of these folks out of the gate, especially because the judge is not particularly, relevant to how this is going to play out, right? Like there's not a ton of great procedural arguments that they're going to have to get out of having this trial. They can't say like, oh, we were illegally wiretapped or anything, right? Like that's just not how this case is set up.
Yeah.
So the judge's role is much more constrained. So look, I get
it's about tainting the process for
exactly.
Yes, and I mean, listen, Tanya Chutkan was confirmed unanimously. It's 95-0, right? 5 people didn't vote. This is not a controversial judge. This shouldn't be. And the process is not tainted, but in order to make the case that Donald Trump needs to make to his supporters, that is the way they're doing this. Because his only out, really, realistically, is to just win the presidency and absolve him and
sure.
pardon himself.
Yeah, it's the Rubicon moment.
Yeah.
For every. Again, I've written about this. I don't know if I've talked about it on the show, but I've written about when the original indictment for a federal indictment came down, there was a lot of right-wing talking heads talking about how this was crossing the Rubicon, which was inapt. It's the opposite. The Rubicon analogy goes the other way. Trump is at this point, much like Caesar, in a position where he's facing criminal liability if he doesn't seize power again. So that's where we sit now. But that said, I will say about Lindsey Graham's complaints, the complaints about the judge are so dumb because there's not a lot of leeway for the judge to make a lot of difference here. But the complaints about the jury pool, that's much more, in my mind, quote unquote compelling. I don't think it's particularly compelling, but I can understand how you can pitch that. You can say this is a population that voted something along the lines of 90% against Trump, given that drawing a jury from here is very likely to have political overtones that are anti-Trump.
Well, I mean,
that isn't a terrible argument.
Listen. Everybody had, well, that's not true. Anybody who voted made a political decision one way or another about Donald Trump.
Sure.
And it is just as biased to have people in unanimous, a pool that is exclusively made out of people who voted for Trump as it would be to have a pool who voted against Trump. I think that, again, I think your point about like, well, then don't do the crime.
Right.
But it's inevitable that people have an opinion on Donald Trump because he was the president of the United States.
Oh, of course. This is a bad argument. I'm just saying that this is a lot closer to the sort of argument that you could make to say, hey, why don't we move this case to Northern Virginia or something along those lines? It's way easier to try and
or
make
West
that.
Virginia, I think, is where they're actually
or
hilariously are trying to get it.
It's a lot easier to make that argument if you say, hey, this is people, not only did they vote and vote strongly against, but they're folks who voted in the Capitol who therefore, are more savvy politically than even anywhere else. Like, we really need to get out of here. That's an argument you could put in a brief and not seem like you're crazy. Arguing against this judge, crazy talk. But arguing against that, like, it's still wrong, but at least you could put it together. This thing's going forward. They're going to ask for delays, of course. The DOJ is not likely to grant those. At that point, it is up to the judge to decide whether or not she wants to grant those. I suppose that's one role for the judge. I sincerely doubt that will be granted.
I mean, I think the big thing that the judges in both of the federal indictments are doing is setting the timeline, right? Is whether or not this can happen before the election, I think is really the question. Yeah, and we'll see. It doesn't seem, I'm not altogether sure it matters. I guess it matters to the extent of how much Trump gets to travel in the last month of the campaign. But it doesn't seem like he's barely traveling now, has something like a 30-point lead over everybody else in the GOP primary. I'm not sure it really matters whether he's convicted or not. Nobody... That's a terrible statement about our country.
This is baked in at this point. Yeah. I mean, people are innocent until proven guilty. However, everyone has prejudged whether or not they believe these allegations one way or the other, and that's not going to change. So I don't really know as though this trial makes much difference. But as far as whether or not he becomes the nominee. So that's that.
Hey, Guy, what's up?
Just having some lunch, Conrad.
Hey, Guy, do you see that billboard out there?
Oh, you mean that guy out there in the gray suit?
Yeah, the gray suit guy.
There's all those beautiful, rich, leather-bound books in the background.
That is exactly the one. That's J.D. McGuffin at Law. He'll fight for you!
I bet you he has got so many years of experience.
Like decades and decades. And I bet, Guy, he even went to a law school.
Are you a lawyer? Do you suffer from dull marketing and a lack of positioning in a crowded legal marketplace? Sit down with Guy and Conrad for Lunch Hour Legal Marketing on the Legal Talk Network. Available wherever podcasts are found.
All right, we're back. What are we talking about now?
Chris actually wrote a story about Samuel Alito's Wall Street Journal thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, he has a Substack now. it's really
What's
just
it
the Wall
called?
Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal.
The Wall Street Journal op-ed page. Okay, yeah, that's a clever name for a Substack.
Yeah, makes it seem all neutral and whatnot. Yeah, but it's one of those things where he's like, oh, basically trying to make this argument that the Supreme Court justices are kings, that their ethical actions are unassailable because of the Constitution. And then that's not how it works, not how it ever worked or should work, But
yeah, I think the money quote from the story is something like, no provision in the Constitution gives any other branch of the government the authority to regulate the Supreme Court.
which there definitely is.
Yeah, which is, I mean, even taking his argument at the most generous is that
bold. Okay, continue.
The most generous is that nothing says that, but that's kind of approving of the negative because the Constitution itself doesn't say anything about the Supreme Court other than it should exist. It says, we should have a Supreme Court, and I don't
Get
know.
on that,
Congress
folks.
should create one that lives
But
by
then
its
never
regulations.
regulate it.
Yeah, I mean, it even says that it makes it should have jurisdiction such that the court that Congress allows. It's only really constitutionally authorized to be a few people who sit in a room and hear whenever two states decide to have a lawsuit, which we had a few of this year. But over what part of the river do we own? If two states choose to do that, then yeah, Supreme Court is constitutionally created. Otherwise, it's all a congressional thing. So
Yeah, the interesting part is Elena Kagan is willing to say that. Yeah. This is not the first time she has responded to her conservative colleagues' wild statements about the Supreme Court. She responded to John Roberts' musings on legitimacy and abortion in the post-Dobbs era. But she also was at the Ninth Circuit Judicial Conference last week and responding very much to what Alito said. She was like, that can't be right. That can't be what he means. And kind of generously afforded Alito the space to back away and say, oh, that's not what I said. I mean, he's not going to take that graceful exit, obviously, but she definitely said, well, I don't know the exact way that he meant it or the questions that were asked and what he was responding to. But she was like, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, literally use the phrase, of course Congress can regulate various aspects of what the Supreme Court does.
Yeah, because it says it right there. Now, that said, the other issue, of course, is that this piece is not, unlike the previous Wall Street Journal piece, this is not written by Alito. This is an interview with Alito by some lawyers who just put a case on the Supreme Court docket.
Yeah.
So...
is he going to recuse himself? No.
I mean, that's what gets me about how stupid this whole thing is that putting aside, he should recuse himself, he won't. But even if, and I think it's indicative, even if it's not necessarily an illegal thing until that recusal happens, but like this is indicative of the lack of respect for the rule of law this guy has. If you have a case on the docket with these guys who want to, show how much they know and are buddy-buddy with him in a national newspaper, when they ask you for an interview, you say, no, not appropriate at this time.
Yeah.
That's really all you need to say.
Yeah.
Well, in his defense, the Constitution doesn't say that you can't recuse yourself just because you're in the Wall Street Journal with the people in front of you, you know. Even if it does.
And those literal words need to be in it or else.
Kagan also revealed in her statements that the court is talking about various ethics rules, because obviously the court can create its own ethics rules, but said that it's perhaps unsurprising that the 9 members of the Supreme Court do not agree about what should happen.
Yeah, because 2 of them are on the take, right? At least 2 of them are openly on the take. And like at this point, you know, that's a bold allegation, but at this point, we've got confirmation of this stuff. Like,
I was going to say that was a bold allegation in like the early 2000s. It is no longer a bold allegation,
right? Like at this point, I mean, Alito's his previous Wall Street Journal op-ed was, "I did something incredibly illegal and corrupt, but I don't think it's illegal, so I don't care." Like, he's admitting to the facts, and Thomas does too in his statements that have been released about this Crow stuff. Like, these guys just think that we get to decide whether or not the law applies to us. At that point, I don't think we're veering too far to say, hey, they've done this stuff, when they're admitting to all the facts in public. Of course, they don't want more clear rules, because their attempt to pretend that this hasn't been just dripping with corruption is to say, we've decided to read what are otherwise very clear rules in a way that doesn't apply to us. But like, that's not really how criminal law works. Not that this is a criminal act here, but that's not how any of these laws works. But I wanted to bring it up as a criminal thing just because this also appears to be the primary defense that's being articulated in the aforementioned Trump case, that it couldn't have been a conspiracy. He didn't really think it was. So if he didn't think it was a conspiracy, it couldn't have been one. That is not how any laws
That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works.
Yeah. But it would be amazing, right?
If you could just be like, well, I didn't mean it.
Yeah.
And that was a full defense.
Like mistake of everything is a full defense to everything. Like, yeah.
Like, I mean, Your Honor, my client says oopsie.
Oopsie defense.
We call oopsie.
Yeah.
We are dismissing the charges, man.
Okay, now what?
Our last thing, we're going to turn to some law school news you can use. The National Association for Law Placement now put out the median salary information for the class of 2022. Mm-hmm. Great news for the class of 2022. Average salary is up. The median salary is up 6.3% over the year before. So it's now a median salary of $85,000. The year before, for the class of 2021, it was $80,000. And the average salary is also up 6.3%. Yay!
Yeah. So this is interesting, of course, because we did not have a run of big law salary increases. That means
we did.
What?
For the class of 2022.
Right.
So yeah, there were a bunch of that was when all
I'm trying to get this math right. The class of 2022. No, the raises were the year before. They would have been
right, and then they would have started. So they would have started with those increased numbers, as opposed to the class of 21 that didn't start with those numbers.
Oh, is that how?
Yeah.
Okay, well then this is actually not a particularly interesting.
It is expected.
Never mind.
It's interesting. It's expected. It is absolutely what we expected. What I think also, though, is interesting is there was also an increase in nonprofit, the median nonprofit salaries for that same class. So that was great for folks who are doing that. But that's also nice. The now powers that be saying, yeah, this was great. I would not continue to expect this. Do not think that this is a trend. This is a blip, and the ship will right itself going forward. Do not expect a further upward trajectory, which I do think is accurate.
I don't know. I think that, the reason why I thought that this was probably interesting by the calendar was that this would be suggesting that there is creeping up of the mid and small budgets, which is what you would expect in response to a big law salary increase.
I mean, I think that is also reflected in these numbers.
Yeah.
And they break it down also by job type.
I see. because that is something that you expect. Obviously, they need to have the gap be reasonable if they're ever going to tease someone out of big law to come to them.
I mean, I think that's what the public interest numbers increase reflects as well, right? So that median salary was now $62,000, up from $58,000 the year before, which is a pretty significant jump for, I think, the public interest jobs.
Yeah. Now, I mean, obviously, people might point to there's been some degree of inflation. To what extent has that swallowed up a lot of that increase? Inflation fears have been more overblown, just statistically, than the media has reported. It exists, but it's not nearly the hair on fire hyperinflation that some people would like to pretend. So yeah, it sucked up a bit of that. And a bit of that is a response to increasing cost of living. But yeah, it's good
Also
news.
of note in the report is that the class of 2022 seems happier in their jobs than any class before. It's a historic low percentage of folks who are currently seeking a different job than the one that they are currently employed in.
Okay.
So it's 6.8%, which is the lowest it's ever been. 7.8. Did I say that? Did I say that right? Anyway, the point is that it's the lowest number, whether that's because they are actually happy, which maybe, or just are terrified to make a change right now, which I think is part of the course correction we've seen in 2023, which might be part of it. But so that's the way the job landscape looks for recent law school graduates.
Well, there you go. Well, cool. So I think unless there's anything else, no?
I feel pretty good about it.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody, for listening. You should be subscribed to the show so you get all these episodes automatically when they come out. You should give reviews, write stars, write something. It always helps. You should be reading Above the Law, of course. You get these stories and more all the time. You should be listening to the other offerings of the Legal Talk Network. You should listen to the Jabot, Catherine's other podcast. You should watch the Legal Tech Week Journalist Roundtable, which I'm a panelist on. You should be following us on various forms of social media. Above the Law is at ATL blog on at least X, I'm gonna say.
And, don't. Don't do that.
No.
And
because then the videos posted on that app are X videos. No.
God, it really was just poorly put together all the way around.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? And Threads, I think. I don't think anyone's still on Threads, but to the extent anyone is, I was reading it's like down 85% since the day it launched. So, but whatever. You should be. Catherine is at Catherine1. Chris is at Rights for Rent. Those are both Twitter artists formerly known as Twitter handles. I'm at Joseph Patrice at that particular location. I'm at Joe Patrice at all the other ones, the Blue Sky and Threads. Catherine, you're on Blue Sky. What is it?
Yeah, it's Catherine1.
Catherine1, the numeral 1 again.
Yep.
All right. So
Is Blue Sky breathing?
Yeah.
Is that dead yet?
So the deal with Blue Sky is that it's smaller than Threads. Like Threads' whole deal was they pulled in all the Instagram folks, so they instantly had a giant base, but no one's doing anything over there because it's just like Instagram with words and nobody understands what to do with it. Meanwhile, Blue Sky is gated and it's just invite only at this point, and it's kind of scarce to get on there, which is generating some interest. But once you are on there, it functions exactly as Twitter used to. So it is very active to the people who are on it, which are growing every day, but it's scarce. And yeah, I think Blue Sky seems to me like the organization that has some hope of succeeding, but we'll see. Anyway, that was all I had to say, I think. And
Peace.
Yeah.
If you're a lawyer running a solo or small firm and you're looking for other lawyers to talk through issues you're currently facing in your practice, join the Unbillable Hours Community Roundtable, a free virtual event on the third Thursday of every month. Lawyers from all over the country come together and meet with me, lawyer and law firm management consultant Christopher T. Anderson, to discuss best practices on topics such as marketing, client acquisition, hiring and firing, and time management. The conversation is free to join, but requires a simple reservation. The link to RSVP can be found on the Unbillable Hour page at LegalTalkNetwork.com. We'll see you there.